Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It looks like we have one member of our subcommittee here. I know Don said that unfortunately Don Gilmore is not feeling well. He's not going to be able to join us. And do you know if Princess will be joining us, Dulce?
I think Princess is away.
Okay, well, if that's the case, and I imagine it probably is, then you are the sole, but you are more than enough in terms of representation for the subcommittee. Please take it away.
Yeah, let me just pull up our agenda really quickly here. Give me a second. And let me just confirm with Princess. So give me 2 minutes, Robert. I just believe
Sure.
Princess is on vacation, but I just want to make sure that's correct.
While Dulce is doing that, I want to also just say thanks a ton, Francisco and Maria from county staff for joining us today. I know your presence is really important and really valued, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And also I see others, Chris Santiago, I know has a presentation that we're very grateful for. And then we're grateful for everyone else who's here as well, Latifa, Hannah, Rafael Castro, I see. So thanks a ton, and bear with us for just another moment or two.
Okay, so let's get started. I wasn't able to get a hold of Princess and link to the agenda. Yes, I will put that in the chat right now. So let me start by calling the meeting to order. I can do just a quick roll call. And I'm so accustomed to having Don lead the meeting. So if there's anything I'm doing impossibly wrong, Robert, please let me know. But Don Gilmore, obviously not here. Dulce Galicia, present, and Princess Robinson, not present. I'll move, I think we do need to approve the minutes, but I think we can hold that off until the next meeting, Robert. And then the agenda, usually we ask to motion to approve the agenda, but that would just be myself, so we can move forward. Are there any public comments from the audience that are not necessarily on our items for discussion for today? If there are, please raise your hand. Okay, no public comment. Oh, wait. I think I saw one. Latifa, I think, do you want to? I think I see your lips moving.
Latifa, you're muted. And Dulce, please don't. I'll send him the link. Please don't worry about that. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry. I was the screen was going crazy, but yeah, I wanted to get to see what was actually on the agenda, and then I also wanted to mention our local Heroes and Rain Gardens event coming up on March 25th at the Urban Tilth North Richmond farm. That'll be starting at 10 a.m. So that day this is the official opening of our rain gardens, and also we'll be honoring some of our community members that day. So we hope that you'll come out and join us. Thank you.
Thank you for that invitation, Latifa. And if you can, please email me the flyer as well. That way I can share it and blast it out. And thanks, Robert, for putting the agenda in the chat. I'll move on. Any other public comments? All right. I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is our items for discussion. So the work that we've been doing gosh, now I don't even know how long, for maybe like 4-6 months, is working on creating an equitable development matrix for North Richmond. And we've been really interested in targeting the goals 1, 2, and 3 that are written out in the agenda. Part of the work that we've been doing is trying to get information with the support of Francisco Avila and his team, to assess and see which developers have made commitments, or where can we strengthen those commitments for the community. And so you'll see that those are some of the main goals that we've been working on, and really the crux of the creation of this subcommittee. I will give the floor to Francisco and Hannah to give us updates on any of the development requirements. I do know there was data and information that was gathered, so if you all can please share some of your findings, or the presentation that you have available for us today.
Francisco and Maria, did you have your own presentation, or should I start with my spreadsheet first?
We're here to support in case there's any follow-up questions, but real quickly, we have been responding to all the requests for information over the past weeks and weeks by Hannah to make sure that all the information is backfilled into her spreadsheet. So we're let her take it from here, and then if there's any follow-up questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Perfect. Cool. So I'll share my screen and just show you all what I've been working on. And definitely, like Francisco said, depending on his help quite a lot, as well as Robert's, to just fill in all these missing pieces. But essentially what I've done is create a spreadsheet. And is the screen big enough, or should I zoom in? Zoom in.
Yeah, just a little more, Hannah.
Is that better, or should I go more? Here. So essentially what I've done is gone through all of the MAC meeting minutes since 2014, and looked at which developers have come to the MAC and presented their development proposal, and some of them like talked to the community about different community benefits that they would commit to. So I've noted all of those here, as well as just linked to the minutes and put the entire discussion. Some of them happened throughout several years, like this one started in 2015, came back to the MAC 2023. So all of that's in there, and the full notes are linked here. And then Francisco also sent me the permit information for each of them, so we can see which of them have been approved. Several that came to the MAC actually never submitted an official application or completed their application, or some of them withdrew their application. So those are below, just to keep track of which ones we can actually follow up with and see if we can make sure they committed to community benefits, like if they actually followed up and did them. So yeah, that's what I have so far. And then what I was thinking to do next is just continue to fill in these missing pieces. Thanks to Francisco and Robert, I filled in most of them over the last few days, but there's just a few more things missing. Mostly it's just contact information for these developers. So that's something we can work on getting. And then something I've talked to Tanya about before she went on leave was to just figure out, do some research into the size of these developers and make some assessment on their ability to contribute. And then I've already kind of done this for pretty much all of them to see how much they already agreed to during their MAC visit. And then later in the year, I don't know if it'd be me or someone else, but I think someone from this committee would reach out to the developers to see if they made progress, and then reach out to developers who never came to the MAC, but who did get a permit approved in the last 10 years or so, to see if or what they would contribute to the community. So some questions I have for this group, and I'm also happy to answer your questions for me or for Francisco, is what we would want developers to contribute to today. Generally, I think in the past, I've noticed most of them contributed or committed to contribute local hire, as well as some of them set a certain portion of their profit back to the community. But I think it was pretty vague, like which community organizations would we want them to commit to? Does it depend on like what type of development they are? So those are things I want us to all think about. And then also just the timing of when we want to start actually reaching out to developers. I know Princess and Dulce have done lots of work on the matrix for community benefits. So would we want that to be complete before we start doing this outreach? Or would it be something we want to start doing sooner than later?
Yeah, thank you for that overview, Hannah. I know I have a couple of questions, but since I'm the only MAC member, I do want to open it up first to questions from the audience, if any come up at this moment, and then I can go ahead and just ask a couple of questions. But any questions from our listeners on the Zoom call today? Okay. I have a question. It's just to clarify, Hannah, and maybe this is something that Francisco or Maria you can support with, but so you mentioned on cell 36, these are all the permit applications that are incomplete or withdrawn. This means that these are the projects that have not been approved through the Department of Conservation and Development, correct? So they submitted an application, but these are not projects that have been approved formally through the Department of Conservation and Development. Is that what I heard, Hannah?
Yeah, well, there's a few things going on here, and Francisco, feel free to also jump in. Some of them, Francisco noted that their applications were incomplete. So I'm not exactly sure if that means they might come back and complete their application later. Some of them withdrew their application, which might have been because the MAC didn't approve of their project or because other stakeholders didn't approve. And then some of them never submitted an application at all. So they never went to DCD, but they did come to the MAC to propose something. So it's all noted in their notes here, but it's project dependent. Francisco, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. We don't follow up with applicants after. Well, first off, we recommend that if they have ideas about developing in North Richmond, that they contact the North Richmond MAC before they even submit an application, sometimes because they need to know what they're facing so that they could package the project together accordingly, when they submit, so we encourage that. But sometimes they don't even apply, and if they do apply and then they get all of our feedback, not just from the MAC, but from every other agency, fire district, environmental health, water district, sometimes they're incomplete for a long time, or sometimes it just doesn't go anywhere. So, but we don't track that in terms of, we know the status, but we don't follow up with them because that's their responsibility to do that. So I think the way it's represented down here is the best way to go about it.
So then I guess going forward, if any of these do end up finishing their application, the ones that are incomplete, is that something you can just keep in touch with me about, like forward me the permits if they ever are approved?
Well, I don't do it on a case-by-case basis, but what I do, as you guys are aware of, is that I have my own personal list of all the applications that get updated, and it's that one big, probably twice a year action that I take, updating that list is what I do. That seems reasonable. So it's like answering your question. Yes, I could do that, but through that one that one list, so that it's more manageable.
Totally, that makes sense. Thanks.
I can't see some of this, but I wanted to, a couple of questions I wanted to find out. So you said that these are developers. So is there a difference here between developers and employers, or some of them just employers here, or are they all developers? First question. And then I saw City of Richmond in here. And I know that sometimes the City of Richmond, what they do here, I mean, some of their, like specifically like the Raven Project, it's the City of Richmond is involved in that, but it affects the North Richmond residents. And so I just wanted to see, like, when you say City of Richmond, do we have any say? Yeah, I don't know. I think there's currently pushback on the Raven Project, but, and then the last thing is the, I saw 411 Brookside on there as an incomplete application. I think Urban Tilt has purchased that. The Nevada Farms, Nevada Farm lot from, yeah, from the family there. I think initially it was going to be the Panattoni development was interested in that. But because Supervisor Joy had put a moratorium on warehouses, they were going to have to, yeah, they weren't going to be able to build that for like a year. So, all right, thanks.
Thank you. I'm forgetting what your very first question was.
The first
Development.
question was, I got you, Latifa. The first question was when the difference between an applicant and a developer or property owner, you know, so what happens sometimes is we might have a speculative building like a warehouse, you know, be built by a property owner, and then, but we have a different user, a different tenant in there. So there is a difference in terms of who might be contacted to follow up with the community benefit commitments and the local HILE programs. You know, the property owner may not be the appropriate person to follow up with that, but the tenant may be. So I think that is a case-by-case situation, Latifa, that sometimes it is the property owner developer who intends to occupy the space, but then sometimes it's a whole different entity, you know, so it's a case-by-case to follow up with that. And then Hannah, if you like, I could go down the questions. I think I could. Yeah, the second question was some of them are noted as being the City of Richmond, but you know, because of the proximity, you know, there may be impacts on the North Richmond community. So definitely following up with the City of Richmond representatives responsible for that type of interaction would be key. But I think that you know, through that course, you know, getting to the developers is always appropriate, you know, because stakeholders are stakeholders, and you know, everybody has a say when they fall into that category. So just because it's in the City of Richmond and the North, well, see, sometimes, you know, the projects come to the North Richmond MAC just to get their feedback, you know, say, hey, we're coming, you know, in this area. So it's like, you know, because of the proximity, you know, it's appropriate to follow up and contact the City of Richmond and continue to have that relationship with the developers. I think that is completely appropriate. And then lastly, it was 411 Brookside. I was aware that 411 Brookside was purchased by Urban Tilt, but I sent Hannah the incomplete information because on the tax rolls, you know, they're like 6 months out. The property owner transfer may have been done in the deeds, but it hasn't been on the public the systems. So when I look on it, it still shows the Netta family. So I left it like that, and we have an open application. That application needs to be withdrawn by the applicant before it comes off of our system. So all of that led me to just to keep it on the books until the official transfer of title and withdrawals happen. So that's why it's on there. Those are, Latifah, I think those were your 3 questions. And yeah.
Great, beautiful. Oh, Hannah, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, I think as follow up to those, added to kind of figure out, as I try to figure out the contact information for each of these projects, I'll make also a note of whether we should be talking to like the hiring manager versus the developer. And then also to follow up with City of Richmond for the 2 projects that fall under their jurisdiction.
That's an excellent point. Another question that came up for me is, so our last subcommittee meeting, we talked about having this matrix be a matrix that there is a feedback loop between the MAC and the Department of Conservation and Development. And you oftentimes, and what we've seen is we have presentations that happen at the MAC meetings, and then all the official formal things get approved at the Planning Commission meetings. And so it became a really important piece of the conversation to be able to understand how we build out this framework, this matrix, so that it is enforced by both the MAC and also the Department of Conservation and Development. I'm curious if there's any guidance, Francisco, as to that. I also heard you say, once a year I do my matrix and I update it. Curious as to how that would also serve as we're thinking and creating this matrix.
I think that's a really good question, and I'm prepared to answer it. Very straightforward. And before I go much further and have an opportunity, some of you may already know Maria, but Maria has been with us for a while here in the Department of Conservation and Development. And I recently asked her to join the North Richmond team because it's better to have 2 people to have contacts and, spread out the work and get her caught up to speed, so not every meeting, but for her to hear you guys today, I think is good. And going forward, I will pick and choose where to have Maria inputted, but still, I'm the direct contact, and then I will maneuver going forward like that. But we are happy to have Maria on our general team and then also be joining us here. So that was that. So Dulce, the question was, as you build out your matrix, how to insert it into the decisions that the Department of Conservation and Development make. The North Richmond MAC being created and appointed by the supervisor has the authority to provide recommendations. You have that, which is purely a recommendation to the zoning administrator or to our department. And you have the authority to appeal projects. So for instance, if a project came through the North Richmond MAC, you guys recommend denial and the zoning administrator approved it, you guys could appeal that to the County Planning Commission. And if you're unsatisfied with them, then you could go to the Board of Supervisors and have the Board of Supervisors handle that. That'll be the final for administrative alternatives. Those, from what I could tell, those are the authorities that the MAC has. The question you asked was very clear, and that is, how do you get the Department of Conservation and Development to enforce your matrix, right? And that is, that's not necessarily, that's a very strict and very clear way to put it. And that's not what we do, right? Because that's saying like, hey, we believe that this is needed. This is what needs to happen. And how do we get you to implement it? But remember, we started and we all agreed, or I'm just saying that it's a recommendation, right? And then if it doesn't happen, then we could appeal it. All right. I think the mechanism that that could be built out and worked on is as part of the North Richmond Max recommendations, to have a clear set of conditions of approval that it recommends with that project. So if you have built out a matrix that says, project X, right? It's this size, so it should be able to contribute this, these type of things. Include that with your recommendation. Say this project, the North Richmond MAC recommends approval of this project based on these conditions of approval. And then that way, staff has those recommendations, and then staff is obligated to consider those recommendations. Some may be appropriate, some may not, and then staff will have to respond to that as part of the staff report preparation. And then that is the interface. That is how I would recommend that the North Richmond MAC get those items that you're working on into our considerations. It is that, but that matrix is your matrix. That is, that is something that you guys are creating, and that is, it's all good. But, the way we look at it is conditions of approval, recommended by the MAC. So, the way we title it and everything else has to be appropriate, because the Department of Conservation and Development, we only have the authority, more or less, to enforce adopted ordinances, right? You guys have the ability, which is great, to have a matrix and do those type of things, but we are limited to the ordinances or conditions of approval that have a direct link to some sort of impact, but they're conditions of approval. So it'd be my recommendation, to use that type of language and use that recommendation with the conditions of approval as the medium to get those communicated to us. And then if there's something that the MAC feels unsatisfied with, to appeal a project or work with some, the staff person responsible and move it that way. Because sometimes a project doesn't have to be appealed, say if it goes to a public hearing, and then a member of the MAC or somebody attends that hearing and the conditions of approval aren't quite in line, there could be more discussion, and the zoning administrator could hear it firsthand and could be continued and worked on, so, but that's how I see the projects going, in terms of everybody's authority and what I've seen in the past.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Francisco. I think it helps to add more color and layers to how we're thinking about this. And I know that we will convene and continue to work on the matrix. So it's just really helpful to have that information as we're thinking about how do we create a formidable matrix. Hannah?
Yeah, just for my own clarity, when you say make a recommendation, does that mean like sending a letter as the board of the MAC to DCD, or what's the mechanism for making those recommendations?
So what typically happens is the District 1 staff member, right now, Robert is filling in for Tanya, would provide the minutes to us, and then that will have the MAC's decision, their voted on recommendation, and then the whatever text is underneath that, right, which could be the recommended conditions of approval, but it would come through the District 1 staff as a result of the MAC's decisions.
Got it. Thank you.
Dulce, it seems as though, based on this discussion, it seems as though we may need to look at the ordinances to see if we are in agreement with the ordinances. Because if the, seems like there are several layers. So we have the one portion here, but then there's a lot that's done in Martinez, and we don't necessarily, so some things we might get in our mailbox, our physical mailbox, but in other ways, I think we need to know about what's going on in Martinez. But if the process is to rubber stamp whatever the ordinance is for the most part, then we probably need to look at the ordinances.
You know, Latifah, if I may, it's definitely not a rubber stamp though. I don't want that impression for you to have that impression. You know, Supervisor Joya has been very, 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 very active on a lot of different applications in North Richmond. And right now, I would say that, you know, for at least the industrial portion, we have some of the most leading conditions of approval in the country, if not the absolute most innovative conditions of approval for industrial projects in the country. So it's by far above our general ordinances because of the direction of Supervisor Joya. So there's a big difference between, say, if somebody's coming in for a new single family residence, right? You know, hey, you meet the setbacks, you meet the height. Okay, you know, we're not going to ask them for jobs and all this and all that. Okay, cool. You know, yeah, they meet the ordinance, we're going to give them that permit. That would be a case where they meet the ordinance, they get their permit. But when it comes to what we call a discretionary permit, something that goes to public hearing, a land use permit, a development plan, well, then we could decide what's appropriate. And then that's above and beyond those setbacks and those type of things. So I think that if I were, you know, representing the county here today, I would say that we are definitely getting as much as we can and what's appropriate from developers above what the ordinance requires.
Yeah, I understand. But as a resident, as a homeowner here, I think sometimes we have a different lens. And so something that the county may deem appropriate may not be appropriate for the health of the community here. So that was my, that's my take.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's well taken. And I also know that the work, you know, the reason why this subcommittee was created is because we're very much in research phase, right? We want to look at the ordinances, we want to look at the data, we want to look at all of the information Francisco is bringing to us, the information that Hannah's gathering, and then to be able to get a pulse from the community and eventually take this matrix to the MAC. And so I do want to say that, like, right now, I do consider this phase at least as very research focused and trying to pull a lot of data and information. So everything that everyone's saying here is really important. I also am keeping tabs on the time. It's 11:05 and we do have another presentation. And I want to make space to have time to ask questions for that presentation as well. There was a question you asked, Hannah, which is, do we move forward with contacting all of these contacts on the spreadsheet, or do we wait until you know, we've sort of done more thinking around this matrix? I do want to touch base with Dawn and Princess, so I want to pause if at all possible, unless there's other recommendations from the community members here. But I would suggest let's pause on that for now, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting. Are there any final questions for Francisco, myself, or Hannah in terms of the matrix and the direction? So right now, we will pause on contacting the contacts in the spreadsheet. Myself, Dawn, and Princess will get together to work and start to build out this matrix that we've been thinking and talking about. All right. Any last questions for Francisco, Hannah, or myself before we move on?
I just put one in the chat. It's probably really quick, so I'll ask it. Francisco, if the developers never come to the MAC, but they submit a proposal to you, is your recommendation to them to go back to the MAC and get that approval, or does that not necessarily happen?
It's required to happen. So the question is, if somebody were to come to me, which happens all the time, You know, we have speculative buyers doing their due diligence. So they come to county and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about buying this property. What are we looking at? So that happens all the time. You know, some groups are bigger. So we send them to the MAC, say, hey, do a preliminary check-in with the MAC so you can understand, you know, what you're facing with. But there's no guarantee that they're going to actually come through with an application. So it's just case by case.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, I will move us to the next agenda item, which is a presentation by Chris Santiago on the Resilience Hub. Chris, go for it. Looks like you have 15 minutes and we'll open it up for questions after. I think you're on mute.
Thank you, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. And thank you for giving me a few minutes. I'm Chris Santiago, Director of Operations for Rebuilding Together East Bay North. And sitting by my side is J.W. Fry. He's our Executive Director. I'm sure many of you know J.W. And for anybody that is not familiar with our work, we're the organization that's doing free home repairs for veterans, people with disabilities, senior citizens, people with lower income. And we also do free community facility upgrades. For example, we're the ones that built out the homeless shelter called Horizon Transitional Shelter here in Berkeley on Grayson Street about 2 years ago. We work on children's schools, mental health clinics, drop-in centers, everything you can think of. We do a lot of work in Richmond, Contra Costa County. As a whole, we've been expanding to a lot of work in Berkeley, Emeryville, surrounding areas. And so this particular project we're presenting on today is another community facility partnership to bring some benefit to the Shields Reed area. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on a screen share here and take you into this hopefully relatively brief presentation. Can everybody see my screen with this one pager up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this, I'll introduce you to the project for anybody who hasn't heard about it yet. This is a one pager describing the Resilience Hub that's coming soon. We have actually two of these coming to Richmond, one to the Nevin Park area and one for Shields Reed. This is a partnership between us and the city of Berkeley, Love Your Block, city of Richmond, Love Your Block program. A grant from PG&E has made this possible. And also some of the partnering organizations is Team SOS, Safe Organized Spaces. I think most of you are familiar with the SOS team that does a lot of work in Richmond, cleaning up the streets, workforce development. So they're a partner as well. And this particular Resilience Hub is really designed to be a resource on super extreme hot days. I think for extreme climate, when the temperature reaches into those very high heat levels, this thing will open up to provide shade. It will provide misting stations so people can cool down. People can also plug in their devices, phones, tablets, things like that. It'll have water and essential storage. And it's also providing jobs for the unhoused neighbors. That's a part of the workforce development aspect of it. And it's ultimately an emergency resource for high heat conditions. So the image you're looking at here is kind of a rough draft. It's sitting like this in this condition purposely right now in its rough draft form. And one of the things I wanted to touch on today was what you see being used for the box, which is an actual shipping container. Now, we're builders, we're construction people, So for us, understanding the usages of these shipping containers and their diverse use cases, it's pretty common for us, but we understand that not everybody is familiar with, you know, customized uses for these things. So I wanted to take you all into a brief presentation about uses for shipping containers that will give a little more context into why we actually chose to use one of these for the Shields Reed shipping container. So here are some uses of shipping container complexes around the world. So there are complexes, complete shopping complexes used by these containers everywhere, you know, around the globe, from London, Los Angeles, New Zealand, Dallas, Texas, Korea, Detroit, Michigan, Las Vegas, Kansas, Buenos Aires, to name a few. And as you can see, really interesting build outs. They can really take any kind of aesthetic. You can stack them however you want. The colors are really nice. This is a full complex here. On the back side of this complex, full restaurants, staircases into all these individual stores. So a really nice theme that's being used pretty successfully all around. Here's another aesthetic showing a little bit of a different use case, different stacking style, different colors. Here's another complex. This is in Nepal. Really nice complex here. Here's another example, you know, completely unique, nice colors. And so obviously we're not going to be building an entire center out of these things for Shields Reed, but there are really nice individual use cases for these shipping containers. So I have a few slides for you on that. And I'd also like to just highlight the kind of the color coordination of these boxes can be really simple and look really nice, or they can be a little bit more complex in design and still look good. So here's another use case, pretty unique setup here with a nice shade station. Here's another individual container. Looks like it could be used for anything from a little coffee stand or any type of vending station. And here's another one that happens to actually be most like what we visualize being the final design for this particular box, with that nice shade station there in a similar design. And then, so we understand that it's you know, it's important to make sure it looks good and that everybody likes how it looks and it blends in with the area, and you know, takes in multiple considerations, you know, including the area culture, you know, and making sure that it, you know, blends well for the community. So we do have a call to action out for artists, and I have a one-pager at the back of this in a few slides down, but I wanted to highlight some creative uses of art for these boxes. You know, it could be a simple one color for these boxes, or it could be a full mural or artistic rendering. So here's one particular case of a really nice work of art. You can actually see the gentleman working on it here, finishing up his design, putting the finishing touches. Here's another box with a little bit of a different style, just two colors, two-tone. Looks really clean. Here's another artistic rendering, a little more complex and creative. This one actually kind of fits the overall theme of this particular box with the energy efficient concept, electricity, you know, being planetary friendly. And here is a full-blown, really complex piece here. So you can see that these shipping containers really can take any kind of painting or art that you want to do, and looks really great. And here's another piece that looks like somebody really put a lot of work into. You see some really nice animals with the bird here, looks pretty nice. And you can see down that there's like a full, several pieces in one there. So ultimately, we want the community to like the way it looks and be able to contribute to the actual design itself. So we've put out this call to action. Trying to move that out the way, but it's not working. Call to action, looking for artists and muralists. $500 artist stipend. So for any artist that wants to step up and be creative and create a design for this, we have the $500 stipend, and we'll also pay for all the supplies. So all the paint, any brushes, any supplies whatsoever that might be needed. We're happy to pay for that as well. And so for anybody, if any of you have in mind any artists, please send them our way. And my contact information is here. You can reach me at chris@rtebn.org. And we'd love to be able to work with any artists that you can recommend, or hopefully somebody in the community will step up and we can work together to get a nice design on there. So I think this is the last slide. Oh, excuse me. This is a slide from the other location that's going to Nevin Park. So that is it for the particular presentation. So I'll go on a stop share for now, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. If there's any questions from the audience, we can take them at this moment.
Hi, Chris. What did your community engagement process look like? When you came to decide on, what did your community engagement process look like to come to this particular design? Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, please do.
Oh, thank you, Latifa. JW here. So the community, this particular project started about 2 years ago. And we worked with Love Your Block. And there were two folks that we worked directly with initially, and that was from the city, that is. And that's Janae Levine Snipes and Stephanie Nye. So they handled the initial outreach into the community as far as a liaison between where this would be placed in an overall resources as defined in the Shields Reed renovation project. And so this was, initially in talks within the greater context of Shields Reed and some of the resources that were going to be provided as the whole park upgrade. And then we continued to do outreach directly into the community through our older adults network at the North Richmond Senior Center on Silver Street. And we worked with Linda Woodards, who actually in that process became not only a member of this particular focus committee, but also a member of the Rebuilding Together Board of Directors. And then I know that Linda and Janie have worked with our outreach representative, Donnell Jones, and they were really leading some of the feedback that we were getting, especially among the older adults, because we identified in both, Shields Reed and in the Iron Triangle neighborhoods that older adults are the most at risk for these high heat emergencies, as well as the unhoused neighbors who are, exposed to the elements. And so our focus was really there. And SOS, or Safe Organized Spaces Richmond, really took up for and got the input from the unhoused neighbors. Where we really focused was the housed neighbors that were older adults.
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear about this. You know, when we did the quality of life program, there was like significant outreach and lots of different community meetings. And this one I didn't really hear about. So I just thought I'd ask about that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think you're the only one, Latifa. That's feedback that we've received before today. So I don't think that you're alone in that. That is feedback that we've received on the Shields Read site before from other folks. So you know, I would assume that, you know, the responsibility of that is more on us. You know, if you hear it once, you know, it's one thing, but if you hear it from multiple people who feel that they didn't, you know, get an earlier update on this particular program, that's my responsibility at the end of the day to ensure.
Let me step in just one moment and just say, I happen to recall a couple of years ago when Stephanie and her deputy at the recreation center, they had a bunch of these meetings visioning the area at Shields Read, and it was really wonderful. It was really positive. There were a lot of people there. We even helped them produce videos and shared those and all that. So that outreach was good, right? But we're talking about dozens, maybe hundreds of people at the park over the course of the several events. We're talking about hundreds, maybe 1,000, you know, possibly in North Richmond seeing the multimedia stuff. The North Richmond larger area, you know, more than 5,000 people now. So outreach is hard, and there's always more to do. And I just wanted to highlight that I saw some good outreach, but, you know, certainly not comprehensive.
Yeah, I want to say thanks for the presentation. And I know I've heard this presentation at a previous MAC meeting. I am curious, is this part of the project to improve Shields Read? And is this part of the $8 million award to redesign the Shields Read, or is this separate from that?
Yeah, this is separate. So when we were going in the beginning of the Shields Read redesign, there wasn't budgeted specifically drilled down resources for vulnerable populations, especially climate resilience. And so the city reached out to us about 2 years ago to say, you know, hey, what can we do, especially for older adults and our most vulnerable populations? And we identified a number of grants, one of them being a PG&E grant. And so we went out and we wrote that grant ourselves in partnership with the city, because they didn't have the resources to go out and get additional grant funds in addition to that $8 million for the park. And we were able to win this. It was one of 3 that we went after, specifically designed for climate resilience and energy independence for these 2 neighborhoods.
Yeah, I was a part of the Shields Read visioning events. I think they held 3 or 4 visioning events, and I don't recall. That's why I was asking, is this separate or is this different or together? I don't recall looking at or visioning those kinds of structures. I do remember trees and canopies and stages came up as really important pieces to the redesign. I do also remember that at the MAC meeting, some of my colleagues mentioned that this style isn't necessarily something that they would have selected as their number 1 choice. I went to the Las Vegas shopping center. It's really cool. I love how they designed it, and it's really family friendly. I am curious how it's going to be incorporated with the larger sort of just structure of the park. Because I think that's going to be really important as we think about, does this fit within the community? Does it entail what we want it to entail? And I think just another suggestion is Latifa brought up the quality of life plan, which is something that we refer to often. I think it would be really important, and suggest anyone to really look over that to see what pieces can be incorporated as they're thinking about design or as they're thinking about engaging the North Richmond community. And so, yeah, I think it would be really important. I'm going to put it in the chat as you all continue to build out this project. Any
Yeah.
other? Oh, go for
Oh.
it. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say that the placement of this particular resilience hub is not within the footprint of the existing improvement zone. So the placement is scheduled to go by the baseball diamond park, just right next to the cage. So between where the batter's cage and one of the dugouts are. So that it would be able to provide shade, especially for, people whose kids are playing on the little playground that's over there. They can sit under the shade, have cold drinks, plug in their phone, and then the kids can also kind of come in and out of the little park and get the misting. So it's not within the overall remodel of that large kind of square rebuild area that's on the east side of the basketball courts.
All right, thanks for that clarification. I know there's a minute left, and everyone values their time. I value your time. Any last questions? I am wondering if there's any next steps for you all. Will you attend another MAC meeting? I know this is the subcommittee, but just wondering what the next steps are in order to just hear more about the Resilience Hub and what's happening.
Yeah, I think that as the conversation continues, I think that at least another presentation at the MAC, maybe more specifically on certain questions, if we can say open up our inboxes, as well as have some kind of sideline conversations between different folks, and then maybe make a presentation that's more kind of a FAQ to this specific site. So I think probably next step is open up the line of communication to individuals, make sure that we're, fielding those conversations, written as well as, just calls or stopping by, and then, prep up those documents, which are basically the questions and answers at least another MAC meeting.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for joining the subcommittee meeting. It is 11:30, so this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.